My name is Birdie. There's a photo of me. I can't have my camera on because it decides to shut everything down every single time. I'm currently a student at Highline College, but I am planning to transfer to UW winter quarter after I get my AA to study biological anthropology. I also use they them pronouns. My project was examining sapsucker feeding in big leaf maples and western red cedars. I know like a lot of forums online and like tree related services get questions about the holes in their trees and if they're going to harm the trees. So that was kind of part of this project to answer that question, but specifically in big leaf maples and western red cedars. The main point of this project was to figure out if sapsuckers even feed on big leaf maples and western red cedars because they're not specifically known to. So here's a little bit about sapsuckers. There's 4 types of sapsuckers. I believe it was until 1983 that they were considered the same species because they look very similar. So the first one we have is the yellow-bellied sapsucker, which is the only one that cannot be found in Washington State, though I have heard of sightings of it. But they might be other different types of sapsuckers because they look very visually similar. Then we have the red-naped sapsucker, the red-breasted sapsucker, the Williamson sapsucker. So as you can see in the photo of the red-breasted sapsucker, there's these distinctive holes that in horizontal lines, and that's how they feed. And they use their tongue, which has like these little like hairs, or it's called a brush tip tongue, and it helps them better get the sap. Okay. So for data collection, my project was focused in King County because that's where I'm located. I'm located in Auburn. I visited 5 parks. These parks were chosen for their nature trails, but also because they were within cities. At each of here's a map of the parks. At each of these parks, I documented 10 western red cedars as well as 10 big leaf maples. To make sure that the datum was more randomized, I walked a certain distance between each tree observation. So like I'd take a photo and then I'd walk for 60 seconds. And if sometimes there was more than 60 seconds because there's not going to be the tree every 60 seconds perfectly. But that's how I was able to hopefully better randomize the data. So the parks that I went to were, and then I uploaded the observations to iNaturalist, which is where I was able to download the observations through a comma separated value file and then make graphs. I wasn't able to make many graphs because it turns out I'm really bad at making graphs. It's really difficult and it shouldn't be, but it was. So I went to Game Farm Park, which is in my hometown. This is where I saw most of the sapsucker damage. These markers are where in the park that I documented trees. This is Game Farm Wilderness Park. Across the river, there is another Game Farm Park just called Game Farm Park, but that's not, it doesn't have the hiking trails. It's like a big field with sports fields. This tree in the corner, that is the one I found with the most extensive sapsucker damage. It's not looking too good. I saw a lot of funky looking western red cedars. I'm not sure if it was just my luck or where I was going, but most of them had like symptoms of thinning canopy. I also went to Saltwater State Park, which is right by the school I go to. There's another funky looking western red cedar. And then I went to Seward Park. If I went to Seward Park again, I would try to go through the whole park so I can get more data on the parts that I didn't visit. But that day I really didn't want to hike anymore, so I stuck to like the outer rim. But if I were to do it again, I would go into the forest more because that's where the birds would probably be more likely to be. I also went to Watershed Park up in Kirkland. Here is a photo of a big leaf maple with a bunch of moss on it at Watershed Park. One thing I noticed at Watershed Park is that a lot of the big leaf maples, they were really tall, but most of the trunk didn't have, like, it didn't have branches where you'd expect there to be branches. There was just like leaves at the very top. It was kind of really strange. I'm not sure if that's common or not. I Before this internship, I wasn't really a tree person. Most of my wildlife knowledge is domestic pets, and they're not really wildlife. So, and then I went to Discovery Park, the northern side, because Discovery Park is huge. This is another Western red cedar that had a lot of like thinning canopy, but I'm pretty sure it's already being observed because there's a little sign. I don't remember what the sign says, but I'm pretty sure it said it was being observed or something. And then here are two graphs of how much I observed sapsucker feeding in each tree. So for each tree, I got exactly 3 observations out of 50. So I had 47 non-sapsucker feeding and 3 yes sapsucker feeding, which was surprising. But the Western red cedar, I would say, does technically have more sapsucker feeding because it was more extensive. So on the left, you can see this Western red cedar. It has a lot of holes, which was what it normally looked like when I did find a Western red cedar with sapsucker feeding. Versus the big leaf maple, which just has one line, which was pretty common. Well, not common. I only had 3 observations, with sapsucker feeding. I don't think that based on this study alone that you can definitively say that sapsuckers like to feed on Western red cedars and big leaf maples. I'm not sure if it was just an opportunity because I only got 3 observations out of 50 for each. If I had a bigger data set, I'd probably be able to say more. Here is just some other data I collected. So we've got tree size and tree canopy symptoms. I wanted to add a third graph of these together, like does tree size correlate with tree canopy symptoms, but I wasn't able to figure out how to do that. But there was a lot of thinning canopy, and I found one tree with an old dead top, but that might have just been the tree that I was able to see the top because it was a pretty young tree. And then here are the same type of graphs for the big leaf maple. Again, thinning canopy. I'm not sure if it was actually thinning canopy or because it's kind of subjective and I can't see very well. So that might be part of it. But I saw a lot of large trees and a lot of medium trees, like 4 very large trees, which are super cool to see because they were huge. What was the next? Okay. Here are some future project ideas I had, which was like the same study, but on trees that sapsuckers are known to feed on. Like, if I were to just observe the trees they're known to feed on, which are like aspens and birches, would there be more sapsucker feeding on one versus the other? I also think it would be cool to see the differences in frequency of bird species in different neighborhoods and whether this is affected by the species of trees in those neighborhoods. I don't know, that just sounds fun. Also, how are outdoor pets affecting tree health? Because I know outdoor pets really affect bird health. Like in Hawaii, outdoor cats have basically decimated the indigenous bird population. And I'm wondering if outdoor pets like cats and dogs have the same effect on trees. Also, I was wondering if like the average income of a neighborhood correlates with the tree species planted there, because I know sometimes relating to tree equity, there tends to be because of redlining. I don't know how to explain this, but like less tree canopy coverage and more tree canopy coverage in more affluent neighborhoods, and I was wondering if the species of trees also differentiate. And then does tree coverage affect the number of pigeons in the area? I just really like pigeons. Also, this is my dog Dave. It's one of my dogs. I added him because how are outdoor pets affecting tree health question. And then my next page is just, well, it's not just my acknowledgement page, but I'd like to acknowledge everyone that this project was made possible with funding from the Inflation Reduction Act of the USDA, and I'd really like to thank Washington State University for hosting this internship. I'd also like to thank Zay, Fig, and Joey for this learning opportunity. I learned a lot, and it's been a really good opportunity because I feel like I know a lot more about how data is processed and interpreted, but also about inequalities in our world that most people wouldn't like think about or notice, like tree equity. And that is the end of my presentation.